And let's just start with a basic introduction. So your Career Center hosts today are me. I'm Anita Manuel, the Associate Director for the Career Center. And I'm joined by my colleague, Lisa.
Hi there. I'm Lisa Tchaikovsky, the Director of Employer Engagement. Welcome.
And thank you again for your patience while we were trying to get started this afternoon at lunch. And we are joined by Texas Instruments, by Padmaja. Would you like to introduce yourself, Padmaja?
Yes, I'm Padmaja. I'm a 23-year-old veteran at Texas Instruments, and I've done quite a few roles within TI, most recently as a back-end engineering manager, previously as an embedded applications engineer and a program manager. So as I go through the presentation, hopefully I could share more about the roles and how things work at TI.
Excellent. So I know that we had another colleague listed here as joining you, but I believe he may not be joining you today. So we will just move forward. While this is an introduction that you may be sharing on Texas Instruments, we will be asking some generalized questions that apply to students of all majors. So we'll start with the generalized questions, and then we'll have, I think you've shared some slides with us of opportunities that are specifically available now with Texas Instruments.
That's right.
So we were going to start with asking you to just tell us a little bit about your role, and you did introduce that briefly, but can you give us some insights on how you got started in the field?
Sure. Hey, Anita, actually, I think Omid, my colleague, is also on the phone. I don't know if he's muted. Can you unmute him?
We can look for, let's see, I don't see, what is
I see a phone number in the chat in the participants group.
Oh, here comes another one. Okay. I'm unmuting. There we go.
All right, I just *6. Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much
Yeah,
for
nice.
me for calling in.
Thank you for having us. We really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
So we were just...
We're all here. Why don't we go back and do a quick reintroduction, since we had a little bit of a challenging start here. So we're joined by a colleague.
Yeah, no, it's all good on our side. I think, I mean, your first question, I think, is actually a good segue into getting us in, because you're asking us, you know, who are we and what we do. So I guess with that being said, I mean, that can segue us in, and I'll give you guys a little brief history of me, and we can start with me and Padma and then go through the rest of any other questions you have, if that's good with you.
Yes, yes. The first question, just tell us a little bit about who you are and your role at Texas Instruments, but also how you both got started in the field.
All right, perfect. Yeah, so I'm Omid. I'm based out here in Santa Clara. What I do at TI is I'm in sales. So I sell the chips that we make, and I work really closely with one of our key customers. So I work really closely with Apple on defining our next generation chips that they will essentially use in downstream products. So part of what I do is I try to understand what the client wants to do, not only today, but somewhere out in the future. And then I work with my factory teams to make sure that, you know, our technology, all the way from a process node, and that's like what we do to build the chips, and then requirements, everything sort of line up, not only today, but out into the future. To answer your second question, how did I get started in the field? So going through college, it was definitely expensive. I took a little bit of a different path myself. Like most people, I think, go apply for scholarships and take that path. I unfortunately don't think I was very smart back then. I took kind of the brute force method, and what I mean by that is I started college, got into it, but then I started a full-time job in parallel. So for me, my full-time job was working at T-Mobile to help pay for college while I was there. And essentially what I did there was I was in sales, so I was selling cell phones. I actually fell in love with it, really liked it. And through that process, I actually was fortunate enough to also get an opportunity to work at an internship at Mercedes. So I would sort of mux back and forth between spending time at my internship, and then T-Mobile was generous enough to take me back in each time. And so at Mercedes, I worked a lot more the technical aspects. It was more on production, more coding. How can we basically build the SUVs as efficiently as possible down the line? So kind of when I walked away from that, I really liked what I did in sales, and I really liked what I did at T-Mobile. And I was like, well, how can I put the two together, and what job opportunities are out there for me? And that was where I landed on technical sales. So my actual role is called a technical sales engineer, and that's what I do. I have a degree in electrical engineering, but a lot of what I do is selling. And the reason I have that degree is it just helps me understand kind of the key terminology of what my customer, is looking for. Example, V in, V out, what are they looking to do? With even signal chain side of things. So that's a little bit about myself and kind of how I got into it. With that, I'll let Padma speak to her side too.
Yes, I've been with TI again for 23 years. The first 20 years, I was an embedded applications engineer. So this, as an applications engineer, I supported digital processors for various industries and all tiers of customers: consumer electronics, automotive, industrial, medical, startups, and established companies like Apple and Cisco. Then I was a program manager for a couple of years, and my responsibility was to successfully take a product from inception to productization. This involved managing design, systems, verification, validation, test, and fabrication. And more recently, I've moved to managing a group of product and test engineers, and their main goal is to ensure that the designed parts that Omid sells are tested and meet all the specs and have no quality issues across voltage, temperature, process variations. So basically, their charter is to ensure that there's no failures in the field. So that's been my journey in TI. And apart from the technical knowledge, what I learned most from all these roles at TI is quickly connecting with people, asking the right questions, narrowing down the problem and solving them, right? I also learned and mastered the skill of getting the job done. So that's me. And to your second question about how I got started in this field, I don't think I have a real unique story here. I loved math and science in school, which made engineering an easy choice. And as for the specialization, without dating myself too much here, during my high school years, the internet was becoming very prevalent, and applications like voice over IP, voice, video encoding, IP phones, all of these were becoming popular, and they all required digital signal processing. And like many, I wanted to be in the up-and-coming fields and chose electronics and communications with specialization in DSP. And for DSPs, TI was one of the big companies, and that made an easy choice for me to get into TI. So that's
Excellent.
my journey.
Thank you so much to you both. So it sounds like you both had an interest and passion for things that are all things technology and innovation, but also using what we call the human skills of communication and problem solving, and really understanding the needs of whether it was a different department, team, or customer, how to best solve their problems. Padma, what was your degree in? I know that you mentioned that you were in the technical area, but what did you get your degree in?
Yeah, electrical engineering, and I graduated from University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign.
Okay, so you're both EE, but two different career paths. Excellent. So Lisa, you're going to get into our next question.
Yes. So many students are worried about finding internships and jobs in this economy and environment. What are your top tips for job and internship search during these challenging times?
That's a great question. Go ahead, Padma.
Go ahead. So I was going to say,
ahead.
like, okay, TI is still hiring like regular times, and some of the tips maybe would be to apply early. I know some of the companies are already hiring for next year's internships, right? And then the third tip I would say is hustle, right? Again, applying early and apply to as many as possible. This was an example I was giving the other day. I had somebody tell me they applied to 600, maybe it was 60, but I think he said he applied to something huge like that. I mean, it's hard for like freshmen to usually land an internship, but if you hustled and actually showed enthusiasm and actually did some work, I think there's still a lot of opportunities out there.
That's great. Thank you. Anita, did you want to ask the next question?
Well, I wasn't sure if Omid had anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think I'll just reiterate some of those points because, Padma, I think the ones you gave were great, but I'll give a little more backstory to why some of them are important.
Oh,
so like
so
getting involved early is, oh, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Almeida, I think you're now on mute. I'm going to try to unmute you. There you go.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you, Almeida. Thank you.
Ah, perfect. What I was gonna say as I was talking to myself there was, I think I would just reiterate some of the great points I think Padma gave, but give a little more backstory to some of them and why they're important. So I think the getting involved early is actually super important because even when we're looking through resumes, etc., if you've submitted something like online into our system, we see that stuff. So we get to see, like, you know, has someone been interested in the company for 6 months, 3 months? All of that, I think, is important because it shows maybe how married you are or wanting to be a part of that team. I actually had a quick little story. I had a guy who worked on my house out here in the Bay recently, and he was telling me about a job that he recently, not recently, but he had landed back when he was sort of in his 18 to 20s range. He was telling me about a time when he didn't have a job, and basically the company that everyone wanted to work for at the time was a, believe it or not, garbage company because the benefits were so great and they really took care of their employees. And the way that you would get into that company would be they would have a list outside the door, and every week he would go and he would put his name on the list. And so eventually what they looked at was they would look at the list and they saw who really started to show interest or was showing a lot of interest. And so he initially landed on, the first job he got was actually not doing the garbage pickup. It was actually, they asked him how flexible he was and if he could come in and just do painting. Like, could you just come in and we need our office painted? He was like, yeah, I can do that. So a couple lessons there was like, one, I would say that message sort of still stands. I mean, we're not going to ask you to come in and paint, but of course I would say like definitely get involved early, show interest to that employer. We have a few different sessions that we're doing, like yesterday or the day before we met with IEEE. Today we're meeting in this panel, seeing people here and seeing you guys apply online definitely helps to your interest. So definitely do that. To Padma's point, we are still actually hiring just like regular times. We've just changed the format to be a little more virtual. And we're putting in a few things in place to help with office orientation and getting to know people around the office. So like virtual hours with people to help you guys kind of get acquainted. So that's still good. We're still hiring there. And then the other thing I would say that's really important is use this downtime to your advantage. If you see companies aren't maybe hiring or hiring differently, other companies, I would say, I think it's a good time to really become in tune with what those companies do, familiarize yourself with the product, study up a little bit in that regard, because that just means you'll come out of the gate so much stronger. For us at TI, though, I will say nothing's changed. We're still hiring like the regular, but you can always use these downtimes, if that's what it becomes across other companies, as your advantage. And I'll talk a little bit more of how that could be advantageous maybe in a little bit more towards the end, but just some things to think about on top of what Padma said.
Excellent. Well, thank you for those examples. It does help bring some of that to life, because, you know, a lot of times students understand the idea of doing research on an organization are having hustle, but what does that actually look like? It is a challenge for many students. And that actually leads a little bit to the next question. Because we are now in this virtual environment, and you had just said that things had changed slightly, not necessarily in the volume or what you're doing in hiring, but more so on virtual onboarding. Can you give us an example of what that looks like, or what students should expect in a virtual internship?
Yeah, for sure. Go ahead, Badmaja.
So I was going to say, basic things. So we have a lot of virtual meetings to introduce the teams, to get the team on, the interns on board. We facilitate virtual happy hours for the interns to connect amongst each other. And in terms of the work itself, the interns we had in our group, the equipment gets shipped to them. You still have a mentor, and so the mentorship obviously is virtual. But you still have access to the whole team, and you're guided through online meetings and phone calls. But the work, and in some areas like Dallas, if you landed an internship in Dallas, so we make exceptions to have some of the people come into the lab, and we do the same for TI here, obviously taking all the precautions. So you still get to work in the lab. You get all the equipment to work at home. So we are making it as effective as possible, like regular times. So that's what we did for our interns in our group. So Omid, you can add from the sales perspective.
Sure. Yeah, so the one thing I'll say is there's no free coffee anymore. But maybe you wouldn't have cared for the coffee that we have there. I think I don't even know what it was, but yeah, I mean, that's something that's different. I mean, probably not a big thing. I was saying it more as a joke. Yeah, so back to what Padman said, a lot of it is the same, except it's in a virtual format now. The one thing I'll say for sales and applications, so working with a customer, is I think it actually, in my point of view, opens up more opportunities in general for like new interns and new hires. And here's why, and here's my train of thought behind it. Before, in the past, the forum, when we would meet with our clients, we would drive there, we'd get out of the car, we'd meet with them, and we'd discuss what they wanted to do. If you think about just across the United States, and I'll start with the United States, but just think about even across the world, now all these interactions that have to happen in person have a virtual forum, meaning there's a WebEx ID, or in your guys' case, you guys use Zoom, there's an ID that you can log into and get into. So what that means, I think, in terms of sales and applications is you have way more breadth in terms of people that you can connect with and interactions that you can see, and you get a lot bigger scope on it than what you would have before, because now there's essentially a room set up for every single meeting that was going to happen. Now, some downsides to it is when I have an intern, or we call them TSAs, the people who are newly graduated who are coming into the programs, they love going to the spaceship or the ring at Apple. That's something that can't happen you know, now, you know, it's, or they like to see it even from the outside. I mean, we can't do that, right? It's a totally different form. It's totally different now. It's something that's not going to happen. Well, for the time being, I'll say. But yeah, the other thing I miss, and I'll make this one last point, is when I do have new people on my team, I love when someone just comes over and they're like, hey, you got a minute, you got a second, here's how I'm thinking about this. Can we chat this out right quick? And, you know, we go and grab a conference room. We can still do that in a virtual environment. But I do like you know, when someone comes over and they just need some help and we can chat it out or draw it on the board, we now have to do that kind of in a virtual environment. But yeah, there's some things that are slightly different, but there's some benefits with it too, some slight benefits that I can see as well.
Sure, those are good points to consider. And just, there was a quick question that I want to address before we move to the next question, but you know, we're a Zoom school, we use Zoom, other people are using WebEx. What platforms are you guys using for your digital meetings? And
so we use WebEx also internally, and we have internal IM tools like Jabber, the Cisco Jabber, and obviously texting. And yeah, so we use meeting rooms, a lot of the same things that I'm sure you guys are using. So.
Right. So, you know, students, I think they don't maybe realize it, but even all of their classes are virtual at this point as well. So they're either, you know, doing Zoom calls or they're in Canvas, you know, so the same systems that they're using just to get through their projects or even collaborate for school can definitely be transferable, it sounds like, in what they'd be doing in the workplace. So they should be somewhat familiar with that process.
That's right.
That's a great point. Yeah, no, that's a really good point.
Next question is all things resume. You can imagine we get a lot of questions on that. Lisa?
Yeah, so what did the best resume you've seen or do that made that candidate stand out? Do you have a good example that we can share?
So I could go. I always like to see personal projects, right? So like you said, in this day and age, so much information all around you. There's no reason for why you should not be picking up a project that aligns with your passion and demonstrates your interest in certain areas, right? So I always look for personal projects. And the other thing I also try to look for is a balance, right? So, so your schoolwork, your work experience, personal projects, and maybe like 1 or 2 lines about your interests, right? So, so in terms of like a specific example, I'll let actually Omid talk through it while I think about a specific example. So Omid, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'll give a few points. You guys can still hear me, right?
Yes. Guys
and gals. Good. I'll tell you a few things I like just to see. I'll give a couple of points, maybe do's and don'ts. I like when a GPA is there and set out, even if it's not like even if it's low, like if it's 2.5 or 2, I still like to see it and have a discussion around that, because here's what I think is great about TI. We see potential, and we have a cutoff in terms of GPA. I believe it's 3.0, but what I'll say to that is I see a lot of early students who come up maybe at 2.5, 2.6, 2.7, and we have a discussion around, look, I like everything you're doing, I think you have potential, but we just need to work on a couple things and come back and see me next time, and let's like work on this together. So I like to see GPA clearly laid out. I think it's super helpful to see that. It doesn't mean if it's low, you're totally casted out. I think there's time to work on it in most cases and get it a little bit closer to spec. So I like to see that. That's one. I like to see some job experience. If you have some there, definitely lay it out. I like to have discussions about, hey, what did you like and what did you dislike? And the reason I like to have that conversation is to help with their fit. a lot of people who come up to me in job fairs aren't really sure what they want to do, and they don't really understand maybe what some of the roles look like. So just talking to them about some of their likes, dislikes can help me pinpoint them to a few different roles that they may actually end up liking, because we have a lot of different things you could do at TI. I really like when they talk about impact at a company that they had if they've already worked at an internship. Instead of, because I see a lot that put like a whole host of tools like C++ and this and that and blah, but I like to hear more about, hey, what did you do at that company and what was sort of the outcome of that? More on that, less on the tactical things. I actually really, really like when someone has used our part, because it helps me just kind of level set with them and they know what we do. I can't tell you how many times at a career fair, most of the people that come up to me don't fully understand or grasp what we do. They're like, oh, I love your calculators. We use your calculators all the time in high school and this and that. So I love when someone has used our parts, because I'm like, okay, this person has used one of our chips. They have familiarity with it. And to take it a step further, people who can answer like very basic level questions about what our part does, I feel like is super helpful. So not only to see it, but if you have familiarity with how the part functions is super helpful. And that are sort of my key, I would say, top things that I look for, or that would help you stand out.
Those are really good examples of specifics, especially in a job fair situation or even doing a virtual interview. But on the resume piece, you know, how do you assess for that, especially the interests? You know, if you don't have a chance to meet with them at a fair and they're maybe submitting a resume online, what are you scanning for?
Yeah, that's a great point. So I would map back to some of the points I made about if you can talk about. So it's not, for me, it's not a because some people are very like format oriented. It needs to be in very much this format and it needs to be this many pages, etc. I personally, I like to see creativity in how they put their resume together. So I'm not looking by any means by any format. Personally, I don't even care if it's multiple pages, and this is all a personal preference. When I'm scanning through, I'm looking at, you know, any past experience, and if you don't have it, that's okay. And the other thing I like to look for is when I say past experience, it does not have to be a job that you had somewhere. What I mean by that is if you worked on a career, like if you worked on a project with teammates, I actually don't mind that in there. So if you worked like on a lab project with multiple people and you can outlay that as a piece of experience that you have, that's good for me, because here's why that's important and why I like to see that. To me, that's a transferable skill. If I can get some sort of look at how you worked on a project and you have some outcomes from that project you worked on, I can somehow try to relay and extrapolate that back to how you'll fit into what we're doing, our culture, etc. So basically, if you can put an experience piece in there, whether it maps back to an actual job that you had, and it can be, honestly, if you worked at a taco shop and it's not even anything to do with EE, I'm okay with seeing that, and I'm speaking for myself here because I can take it and transfer it out. So number one, any past experiences. Number two, if you've worked with any of our parts or you have familiarity, and it doesn't even have to be TI parts. It can just be semiconductors in general or EE related parts that you've used and have some experience with. And then of course, if GPA is there, it totally helps to see that as well. So these are just a few quick tips that I think would be important just to, as we quickly, you know, as we're scanning through so many resumes that come down the pipe, it would be helpful.
Yeah, and let me add a couple things there.
Sure.
Just like other companies, there's a lot of analytics that goes on, right? So using the keywords, I think it's still important, right? So we get lots of resumes, just like everyone. So using the right keywords like embedded, analog design, and cadence tools, MATLAB tools, just using the right keywords actually will let your resume be picked. Actually, we have a huge team, a recruiting team, so they do more manual reviews as well. But just to go through like the first pick, I would always advise people to make sure you're using the right keywords as well.
Excellent.
But Padma, a word of cautionary too, and we'll talk about this maybe a little bit as if you put it on there, please do make sure you do like know it.
That's
like don't go to like keywords.com and copy and paste everything EE related and slap it in there and hope that it gets picked up, because that can similarly hurt you. So just a cautionary word there.
Yes, that's also a pet peeve of mine. So if you put something on your resume, be prepared to talk about it, right? So, I mean, if the interviewer is asking you some basic questions about your project that you actually put on your resume and you're not able to answer it, I think that'll go negative against you. That's a good point.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful reminders. You know, we also hear students that will say, well, I'm just going to post as many of the keywords as possible that's in this job description. I'll get picked up by the ATS, and then I'll worry about the interview, you know, once I get there. So it's not just the number of keywords, but your actual ability to use those technologies, and then I'm assuming provide context for how you've used them in your resume.
Exactly.
Because we started a little bit late, and I know that there's some questions, so those of you who are listening in, please type in your questions in the Q&A box, and we will go ahead and start asking those of our panelists today. Our last two questions our general ones that we were going to ask you was one around diversity, inclusion, and belonging, and how TI supports that, and especially in the onboarding process for our students. So if you have any insights or thoughts about
Sure.
the way that you guys support diversity would be great.
Yeah, so that's one of our values. So inclusion. We have about 15 diversity initiatives in TI. Women's Initiative, which I actually was recently leading for the Bay Area Women's Organization. We have Black Employees Initiative, we have Pride Initiative, Veterans Initiative, Indian Initiative, Chinese Initiative, Christian Initiative. I mean, you name it, we have it, right? So you should feel pretty well connected. And we actually host multiple events throughout the year and make sure that interns are invited to those events, so they feel a part of the group. And the other thing I'll also say, like TI doesn't actually go ahead and hire to meet the numbers or compromise on quality or requirements, but we make effort to reach out to schools and organizations where we find this talent, right? So we go to the SWE organizations and the IEEE organization and some of these places where we may find this talent. And we also actually support organizations like High Tech, High Heels, so that we are actually building the pipe for more diversity coming into the technology fields. So
that's great.
Omid can add more.
Yeah, I mean, I'll add a little bit more in a general sense. I think, you know, diversity, when you think about it, it's like everyone has their own train of thought, right? Someone can do one thing one way, and someone can have a very different approach of arriving at the very same solution or even a better solution, right? I've worked for companies before who, you know, you bring up an idea, you think it's a novel idea, it's good, you bring it up and they're like, that's stupid. Why would we ever do that? That's dumb. But I think what's important about TI and really working at TI is everyone gets a seat. You have an idea, like, let's talk about it. Let's make this thing better, whatever it is that we're working towards. Let's not Like, let's not put people down because maybe they're new and they haven't been here for 20 years, so their idea can't be good. Like, I think it all comes down to, like, let's hear each other out. You may approach something differently than I approach something, but can we hear each other out and maybe take even points at the end of the day from what you're thinking and from what I'm thinking and arrive at something that is collectively better. So I think that's definitely a really important aspect, especially like as you folks start to matriculate out and start to, you know, decide where you want to work, like try to figure out what that looks like. You can use resources, I think, like Glassdoor. I think the best ones, maybe if you have like friends and stuff that are at companies, kind of figure out what that onset and culture looks like. But really, I think it's important for us to all hear each other out, no matter our background, where we came from. You know, it's a really important aspect because we all want a seat at the table. Like, we all went to school and we learned how to do an approach maybe one way that's slightly different, and we put that with some creativity, and we may collectively be able to come up with something that's better than what we initially thought. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on it in a more of a general sense.
Right.
Yeah, actually, Omid brought up a very good point I think I should reiterate. So TI has a very open door policy, right? So we give a lot of value to interns, ideas, and you get an opportunity to meet several of our leaders through these diversity initiatives and also otherwise, right? So there's a lot of opportunity for feeling included and your voice being heard.
Excellent. That's really encouraging to hear. And I think for our students, you know, it's not only finding a good fit, but also how do you become part of the culture and make an impact based on your unique experiences and backgrounds. For the sake of time, we do have a few questions in the queue that I want to get to, but I think that some of them will be answered by reviewing the opportunities that you have right now. So I have your first slide available up on the shared screen right now on engineering full-time opportunities. Would one of you like to kind of give an overview on those opportunities?
Sure. I could talk through some of these, and Omid can talk to some of those as well. So we have applications engineering, which is like we have two kinds of applications engineers. We have field applications engineer, which I was for several years, and then we also have factory applications engineers, or BU applications engineers. So basically what a field applications engineer does is we partner with our sales engineers, and we actually work with customers to understand their requirements and propose a solution from our breadth of processors or analog parts. So we help the customer design their system using our device knowledge, right? So we propose, okay, so this is the processor that fits in your application, and these are the advantages it has over competition. So as an applications engineer, you are expected to have domain knowledge on the part as well as on the end equipment. And we do things like pre-in work, like helping the customer design in our part, and we also post-in. So after the part is designed in, we actually help the customer with some software, example software to connect with other chips around the device, doing some benchmarking for power, for performance, and also we help, like after the device becomes a product and it's productized, if it has any field failures, we help the customer debug, right? So all of these are part of a field applications engineer. As a factory applications engineer, they're expected to have a lot deeper knowledge in each product. So the field applications engineer, if they have any questions, they have the factory applications engineer to fall back on. and the factory applications engineer acts as a bridge between the designers and the field applications engineers, right? So they write application notes on how the part works. They create some reference designs using the parts that just got designed. They help with bringing up the parts when they just come out of the fab. So those are all the things that a factory applications engineer does. A design engineer, they help with designing the part, right? So we work with marketing systems with the sales engineers and the field applications engineers to define a part that actually has an industry need. And then once the part once it's spec'd by the systems engineer and the marketing engineers, the design engineers take the specification and actually design the part, right? So that's what the design engineers do. So we have analog design, we have digital design. So some of the chips we make have a combination of all of these things, right? So we have some digital parts as well as analog parts. That there's lots of interfaces. So that's very interesting work also. The manufacturing engineers, so TI has several fabs in Dallas, Maine, in China, in Japan. So we have several fabs. As a manufacturing engineer, you're actually helping manufacturing of the part, looking at the different processes. Okay, which process technology do we use for these current parts, and what are the process variations? So they're looking at, they're working in the fabs and making sure everything is running well and the parts come out as quality parts without any defects or failures, right? So that's what a manufacturing engineer does. A product engineer, so we have product engineers in the fabs, as well as we also have product engineers as part of the business unit. So the product engineers in the business unit, they're looking at the devices that are coming out of the fab, and they're analyzing the data to see, okay, are all the parts that are coming out meeting the specification to which they have been designed? And if not, what is the variation? Is it varying across temperature, across process, across voltage? And they try to pinpoint what the issues are, and they work with the fabs and make sure some of those get fixed. I will let Omid talk more about sales. And if you have
what
Yeah,
we'll
I mean,
do, you transition really quickly. I'm sorry, Omid. I just wanted to let the students know as the questions are coming in. There's also concerns about internships. So what I'll do is I will switch over to the internship slide while Lisa will start asking some of the specific questions that we're getting after you review the technical sales piece.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I think I'll make mine brief just in the interest of time. I'm customer facing, work very closely with the client to understand what they need. My feedback loop goes back into the systems engineer and the applications engineer and product marketing. So if you look at basically, this is a life cycle. So if you had the slide up that says breadth of roles at TI, basically the one that's at the very end that says field applications engineer, technical sales engineer, if you were to just circle that and loop that back into the systems engineer, applications engineer, and product marketing, basically I'm a feedback loop that dials back into the front side of this where it says product definition to ensure that we're making the best parts possible that our clients can use and really make differentiation in our clients' products. So just understanding how they want to differentiate their end product. So for an example, if a client came to me and said, look, there's X product out there, we want to make sure that our battery life, instead of just being 2 hours long, we want to make it 6 hours long. Well, let's go to the drawing table together and see where is most of your power being used. Okay, it's in that block. Can we help with that block? Are there things that we can do innovatively to drive the power down in either that block, or maybe it's your gauging technique, how you're gauging how much juice is left in your pack. let's take a look and see if there's a way to optimize that. So when your system says that your battery is actually at 0, you may actually have 20% left in the tank. How can we squeeze out that last 20%? Well, we may need to put better gauging techniques together. So really it just comes back to me being the feedback loop that helps drive our next generation products so that our clients can have the best products possible out there.
Great.
Yes, I want to actually make one point here. So we understand, like, for someone coming right out of school, it's hard to figure out which area you want to go into. So TI offers something very unique called a rotation program, where we allow our new hires to actually experience several of these different roles before they actually choose where they actually want to work. So I just wanted to make that point.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and ask some questions from the audience here. They've actually typed them in. So the first question to you is, my degree is in applied mathematics, but my last internship was somewhat related to engineering. I'm a people-oriented person, and I'm certainly happy to learn more about engineering. How strict is the engineering degree requirements for technical sales positions at TI?
So this is something we have to take back, but so we do look for electrical engineers, but if it's a very compelling resume, we could take a look at it, but on the onset, so we do have some minimum requirements in electrical engineering. Given that we are a semiconductor company, yeah, we focus on electrical engineering as a minimum degree.
Okay. Are there any opportunities in supply chain at TI?
There are, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
I don't know for this round. I'll have to see actually for this round if we have anything. I think the internship ones right now is what they have listed in the slide set, but these change pretty frequently. So I'll give a quick snippet on supply chain, especially for my team. I mean, we're shipping a lot of freaking parts, a lot of different parts, a lot of different SKUs of parts. We have to know how to do, or we actually probably need your guys' help at some point as you guys matriculate out, but we have to figure out, essentially, what does the client want to build? Well, how do we start wafers on time, right? If there's 2 different wafers going through a fab, how can we prioritize those maybe differently to make sure that we can hit the customer needs across the board, right? There's a lot of pieces where we need, I think, help in supply chain. And what we're doing right now is actually a lot of our business traditionally transacted through a lot of distribution channels. We're bringing some of that in-house to help be closer with our customers. So basically, instead of ordering through some third party and getting some ripple effect where they tell us the customer might be using this much, we kind of directly take that order. Well, as that starts to ramp up and we do more of that, we're definitely going to have a bigger need for that. So to be more succinct, and I'm sorry I went on a tangent, yes, there are supply chain roles within TI. I don't know if any of them are in the scope of this, but I know for sure there is.
Okay, thank you. So another question that's come in is, my degree is in biomedical engineering, and as a student in BME, how can I get my resume to be noticed for opportunities to become a product engineer?
Interesting question. We do support customers who are in biomedical engineering, but the kind of things we do, and as a product engineer, actually, like I mentioned, the kind of things we focus on are like process, the technology. So it's more like the physics of semiconductors, right? So not so much biomedical. So my suggestion, yeah. Go ahead,
let me add a little. I want to add a little bit to that because I personally see some value in that. Now, I don't know how to get it through the TI system because I feel like sometimes the TI system is black and white on engineering. So maybe it's something that we push for. But here's where I'll just say my 2 cents where I could see some value. So we have a group that does analog front ends. They make AFE. So think about you pick up a Fitbit, you put it on your wrist, etc. And it takes, as an example, it may take your heart rate, it may take your ECG, blah, blah, blah. In terms of biomedical, I see some synergies there. I don't know what specific field of that you're in or what your specific focus was, but understanding the biomedical aspect of that, I see as a huge value add because let's say you're talking to a client or you're working with a sales engineer, you may know what those key metrics are. Like, hey, do they want to measure it? You know, if they measure it this much more at this frequency more often, they'll be able to tell if they have heart palpitations, et cetera, et cetera. You may know those things that an EE may overlook. So I see some value in it. I don't know what the exact scope is. And I think it's maybe a little bit more of an offline discussion with that individual to figure out, you know, is it black and white or are there things we can do? But I would stay open to it and just say it's a discussion that we can have.
And to follow that on, I would say not to limit yourself to like a product engineer. So I think, I mean, when you're applying for an internship or like a role, I mean, keep it open, right? So to what Omid is saying, yes, there is some value if you were open to looking at being an applications engineer, right? I think there is value there, but if you're talking about product engineering, I think that limits your scope if you have a different background.
Thanks for the clarity there, yeah.
Okay. Anita, do we have time for more questions?
So we're at 1 o'clock. We did start a little late, and for that, I apologize. I'm not sure if our panelists can stay on for an extra 5 minutes. I'll try and synthesize some of these together. I think the biggest question right now is that very specific to what areas of specialty one should focus on in their resume as it relates to the broad engineering pathways. So for example, electrical engineering students with a preference in focusing on digital circuit design, should their resume should they write about projects only focusing on the digital circuit class, or should they write both analog circuit and digital circuit projects? And I think the concern here is about, do I have to fit everything into one page?
I'll give a couple points on that.
Yeah. Go ahead, Omid.
I think for what I look for, I think, and what you should think about is it comes down to passion. What are you the most passionate about? If you're passionate about coding and that's your thing, like I think that's what you highlight and you try to line up. If you're passionate about doing analog design, you know, that's the thing I would highlight. And the reason I say this is at the end of the day, are you trying to land a short stint that will just get you in the door? Or are you trying to get into something that you're going to be passionate about that's going to be way more fulfilling in the end for you? So let's say you put what you are passionate about and it doesn't land. I think it's okay to keep looking until you find that thing that aligns with your passion, because once you get that thing that you're passionate about, honestly, it's not even going to feel like work. You're going to roll in, you're going to be like, this is easy. Like, I do this in my sleep. So what I would say to that point is align it based on passion. And while that may take an extra cycle or two, possibly, if your passion isn't something that's being hired for right out the gate, I think it's something that will pay you dividends in the long term.
Yeah. And I'll answer that from a TI perspective, right? So TI makes both analog and digital devices. So there's a lot more analog parts than we do digital. So if you have a design background, I would generalize it to keep it more analog and digital. So if you are open to both, again, you would want to do what's driving your passion, but at the same time, sometimes it's in early career, it's hard to know what your passion is and what you like, right? So be open, And yeah, I would say put both analog and digital design if you're open to doing something in design.
Great. And then the last question we have that I think might be helpful is if students have very specific follow-up questions, are either of you open to them reaching out to you with some of those questions? And if so, how can they best connect with you?
Sure, I'd be open. Actually, do you have contact with Amanda, our recruiting manager? She could direct the questions to a wider team, and you could get more.
Perfect. We can do that. I think the other question was a lot of our students are trying to connect with professionals via LinkedIn. And so if there was a LinkedIn profile that you were open to sharing, we could do that as well. But it sounds like what we can do is if you go to the chat box for students and you have additional questions, please fill out the Google form that's listed there. When we email the recording back to you, we can also share an email address that you can then share those questions with through the HR department. So with that, I do want to thank you both for your time and for sharing some of those insights. Again, for students, we do appreciate your feedback as well. So if this type of event is helpful to you and you'd like to see this continued, please take a minute to fill out our survey here. It's a really short survey. There's a bit.ly link on the slide listed. And survey participants are in a raffle to win a $20 Amazon card. We can all use a $20 Amazon card these days. And our panelists, again, thank you for taking your lunch break and joining us today for your insights.
Sure, thank you for the opportunity. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Excellent. All right, everyone, have a great day and stay safe.